from heaven. It talks about God's salvation there, but it says it's near them that fear him, but then it says that glory might dwell in our land. And so we know that our emphasis tonight is, let me read it the way I have it here, is personal effort to reach the lost, to reach lost souls. And we know that the only hope for our nation is not a Supreme Court judge. Now, we trust that I trust that the one who has been nominated gets in because she takes a very strict view of the Constitution and everything. But that's not what's going to save America, right? They may make some good decisions if we get more of the right kind of people. The election, no matter who wins, is not going to be what determines whether America succeeds or fails ultimately. It's whether, here he talks about his salvation, glory dwelling in the land, mercy and truth met together, truth spring out of the earth. And so it comes down to us, doesn't it? It comes down to us as the church as a whole, the body of Christ, which we're talking about individual believers, that we have a responsibility, don't we? We have a responsibility to promulgate, is that the word? To reproduce ourselves spiritually. That's the primary purpose of the believer. And again, all you have to do is look in the book of Acts, and in fact, we'll go to Matthew chapter 9 first of all, and then I'm going to go to Acts before we close. But I'm not going to spend a great deal of time tonight. I just want to focus our attention here on this matter of a personal effort to reach the lost. Every day, we need to understand that every day we have an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And not just to feed the hungry, and there's some good causes out there, but every day we have an opportunity to make an eternal difference in the lives of others. And how we view people around us and how the actions we take can mean the difference between heaven and hell for others. Now, it's not natural, according to the flesh, to put the needs of others above ourselves, right? And we're all guilty of this, but we're all zoned into what our day has, to what we need to get done, and we just go flying on the way and do what we need to do, and we really give little thought to other people around us. Once in a while, we'll have a wake-up call, and something will jump out at us, but our flesh says that, I've got my own things to do, I've got my own problems, I don't have time to be involved in other people's lives. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? And so what we need, and we're going to see here from Matthew chapter 9, what we need is a change. We talked about a vision, I think, earlier, I think maybe on Sunday, but we need a change in our attitude altogether. Matthew 9, verse 35, you've heard this passage, read this passage before, but it says, Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. That word compassion there means a feeling of distress for the suffering of others and having a desire to alleviate. And literally, if you look deep into what the meaning of that word is, compassion, it means gut-wrenching. Okay? And so it's not just a matter, well, that's too bad, and we go on our way. Compassion is having that feeling of distress, and that we want to do something to alleviate that distress. And so Jesus, you notice here, he went about teaching and preaching, but it says, and healing every sickness of disease among the people. And Jesus cared for physical needs, and, it was to show that he cared for their spiritual need, that he had power not just to heal physically, but power to heal spiritually. But we have, whether it's because I'm not sure what it's due to, but I think maybe just we're afraid of being associated with certain extremes on one side or the other. But we seem to think physical needs aren't that big a deal. We're here to win the lost, and we don't give much credence or much attention to those who have physical needs. I've said before, and I've got somewhere in my notes, but I don't see it offhand, but I've mentioned before, it's not original with me, but people don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. And so we need to make a personal effort, but a change in our attitude. Jesus it says he had compassion. Matthew 14:14, Jesus was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. Matthew 15:32, Jesus said, I have compassion on the multitude because they have nothing to eat, and I will not send them away. Okay, those were physical needs, weren't they? He was preaching the gospel at the same time, yes, and teaching, but he was unwilling to send them away hungry. Matthew 20, verse 34, Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight. And so Jesus was often, in fact, even in this chapter, just prior to this, verse 9, where it says, of chapter 9, verse 9 of Matthew, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the receipt of custom. He said, follow me, and he arose and followed him. Very next verse, it came to pass, Jesus sat at meat. Behold, many publicans and sinners came and sat with him and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw it, what did they do? They began to criticize, didn't they? Why eateth your master with publicans and sinners? Jesus was often criticized for who he reached out to. Think about the ones he reached out to. Matthew was a tax collector. We had another tax collector. Who was that? Remember Zacchaeus, right? That Jesus reached out to. We had the woman at the well that was an outcast of her own people, and not to mention an outcast of the Jews, but because of her lifestyle and who she was. But Jesus went very specifically, that the Bible says, he told his disciples, I must needs go through Samaria. I've got to go through Samaria. And it wasn't for any personal purpose, but it was to meet that woman's spiritual needs. Who are some others? But you just think of the ones that Jesus reached out to, right? The lepers. So these were the outcasts of society. He was often criticized for who he reached out to. You know, I think if Jesus were engaged in his earthly ministry today, that many or most Christians sitting in churches today would probably have the same response the Pharisees had back then. You're going to allow them into church? Look at them. Look at their hair. Look at their tattoos. Look at their earrings. Look at whatever you want to put before. And we kind of look at them with suspicion and rather we should look at them with compassion, shouldn't we? And have compassion on them. I think we would have a similar response to the Pharisees. I'm quite afraid of many of our independent, fundamental Baptist churches. We know Jesus did not look for perfect people. In fact, he said, I've not come to call sinners, or to call, now I lost the verse, sorry about that. He came to call sinners to repentance, but he came not to minister to those who were well, but those who needed a physician. Because, again, people in their pride, they thought, I'm set, I don't need anything. He came to the ones who needed something and knew that they needed something. Now, again, he preached to all and tried to reach to all, but he didn't look for perfect people. Now, I ask the question, what about us? What about you? When you see someone in need, whether it's physical need or even more specific, someone in spiritual need, what's our response? And I've had the same, let's be honest, I've had the same thoughts as we all do from occasion. We look at somebody and we immediately will say, well, they wouldn't listen anyway, right? We can tell by looking at them. They're not going to listen. They don't want anything to do with religion or anything about Jesus or anything like that. Well, who are we to make that judgment? Who are we to make that determination? I remember the sower that sowed the seed. He threw it on all the soils. Remember? And we focus a lot of times on where the seed landed, but I like the picture of the sower because he didn't care. Some might say, well, that's wasteful. He's not targeting, he's not playing. But his job was just to get the seed out there, right? And so it is with us. The sower in the parable Jesus told was not willing to judge the worthiness of the soil. Well, that soil, it won't grow there, so I'm not going to put any there. He didn't say that. But we often do that when it comes to trying to reach others for Christ. Go to Acts chapter 8, verse 4. I'll make a few more comments here, and then we'll talk about our prayer emphasis tonight. But Acts chapter 8, verse 4. Acts chapter 8, verse 4. Just one verse here and some closing thoughts. Acts chapter 8, verse 4 says, Therefore they that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. Now, we know there's two different words for the word preach that's often used. One means to trumpet, okay, as in You might get the idea of a preacher that's yelling. No, you might get the idea, but somebody who stands up and preaches publicly. But that's not what this word is. This word is from the Greek word where we get our word evangelize. Okay? And so what it's saying is, as they went, they were scattered, but as they went, they evangelized. That is, it's the idea of just ordinary conversation. Okay? They didn't get on a street corner and start with a bullhorn and preach the gospel. I'm not opposed to that, but that's not what it just says everywhere they went, they just shared the word, shared the gospel. That's what it means there. They simply conversed with people as they went. And a statistic I saw many years ago, and I don't know if it's changed a little bit, but I'm sure it's got to be at least this, but it says that 92% of people who are saved as a result of a friend sharing Christ with them. 92% are saved as a result of a friend. And I think we can probably even say, to get people to come to church, probably at least that many, we would say come because of the invitation of a friend, right? Only 6% are saved as a result of the influence of a pastor, whether it's a funeral or whether it's visits, whatever the pastor's engaged in. 6%. Only 2% are saved as a result of special meetings at a church. And we have these visions of revivals where hundreds of people come down, but that's only 2% people who are saved. 92% of the people who are saved as a result of one-on-one, of a friend. And so that ought to give us a picture of what we need to be doing, right? We shouldn't need, and again, in some of our circles, I'll probably be labeled a heretic, but we shouldn't need a soul-winning program to be a witness, okay? The early church, they didn't set up some big grand program to do this and this. They just, as they went, one-on-one, they evangelized and brought people to Christ. There's people all around us who desperately need someone to care and to show them love of Christ. If not us, then who? Then who? You might say, but I don't know anyone who's lost. Well, then something's wrong. Because we are here, again, to do a job, but how do you win people if you don't know people, if you don't get to know people? And now doesn't mean we go and belly up to the bar, as they say, but we might wait for those who come out and are seeking help. It's on video, I guess okay, but I got a call several years ago. There was a lady that we were trying to help, actually a man and wife we were trying to help, but got a phone call from her from inside one of the bars uptown here, and want me to come get her, or to help her. I shouldn't necessarily say come and get her, but I think, if I recall, she was talking about taking her life and things, but you could tell she was very inebriated, but she was inside. And I said, I'll meet you at the back door, of the establishment. I wasn't about to go in the front door, but anyway, just because of what people in town might say. Not that that's that big a deal, but anyway, so I got there, didn't see her. I did step inside the door and found out that, actually, no, I've called, that's what I did. I called inside, and they said, well, she already left with somebody. So, and I was there in a matter of, not very long, maybe 10 minutes or less, but I don't know how I even got on that, but I guess you go to where the people are that are in need. That's the point. We don't participate in the things that they perhaps are participating in, but we need to be willing to sit down with them no matter where they are, no matter what the situation and the condition is, and to show that we care for them. But we shouldn't need, again, a program to win souls. We did something, this has been, I don't know how long ago, several years ago, and I think I'm going to revive this, and so those who were here will probably remember, but we had the First Baptist CIA. Anybody remember those little cards we had done up? And it said First Baptist Church CIA, something like that on the front of it. On the back of it, I think it had the gospel, ABCs, whatever. But anyway, but then spelled out, of course, CIA is like this, and spelled out is Church in Action. And the idea of that was, and we did some special projects. We gave out, for example, some full-size candy bars at the gas station and Dollar General with a track attached and so forth. And what else? We took around some baked things to our police department, to our doctor's offices, to things like that, and with a little card, CIA, things like that. But then we had some leaf raking parties, trying to get our teens involved. They're so busy now today too. I don't know if that would work, but I would like to try it. And not just ones of our own church. That's good, and we did that. But a couple of elderly people from town that we knew wouldn't be able to get out, or at least could use some help, and raked their yard and left a card, CIA, Church in Action. And so if we individually were to have, and the idea is this matter of we need to be intentional. Because if we're not looking, most likely we're not going to see, right? And so intentional in what we do to minister, to reach out to people. And through this COVID thing, we've been trying to, because it's not, I just don't feel right going to people's doors and standing. You can have a mask on, I guess, and I guess we should be willing to do that. But still, some people, they're just, it's hard enough normally to get somebody to to talk to you. And now in the midst of all this, and so because we were going to do some more targeted days, areas where we'd target and pass out tracts and things. But and I've said this before, and I really mean it. I don't think we would have to do that if every individual believer took the responsibility on themselves for their own sphere of influence, their own friends. We would see people coming to church. We would see people getting saved, and so forth, if the individuals would just be involved. I'm stepping on my own toes too, so don't yowl too much. but we've forgotten about when we go to church and we expect the church to have these outreach programs and people to come to the outreach programs, and then we can say we're seeing it all. I think we're seeing it all wrong. Backwards. It starts with us, and then we can bring them into the church, but it has to begin with us. Most people aren't just going to stop and walk into a church without being personally invited, right? I had someone stop by. I was out here spraying some weeds and things yesterday, I guess it was, and a fellow rode up on his bike and got off and introduced himself, and he said, what's this revival thing all about? And so I had him come inside and got him a flyer back there, and told him, about the meeting. Said, we'd love to have you come, and he said, well, you might see me. I don't know if we will or not, but anyway, that doesn't happen very often, right? Usually we got to go find them. And so we need to be intentional about that, looking for opportunities. And so I think maybe, I'll do up some more of those cards, and just if we see somebody struggling with groceries, or I'm not talking about paying for them, but like if somebody needs help with their grocery cart, or they drop something and or spill something, and why not stop and help, and we can give them one of those cards. I'm part of the First Baptist CIA, whatever it is. But I had a phone call, again, this has been several years ago, from someone called the church, and just wanted to thank me for what our church does or whatever, but a complete stranger. But they said they were in the Walmart parking lot and were struggling with something with their cart, and a young man helped them, either, I don't know the girls do, but helped them with the cart, and gave them one of our church tracts. And so they called me and said, I don't know who it was, but I want to thank you. I have an idea who it was, and they're no longer here. They moved out of the area. So, but anyway, so I think I might know who it is, but because they were doing things like that pretty regular. But if everybody did that, think of how many people we could come in contact with. I think that would be far more, and I'm not against going door to door, but I think it would be far more effective to have 20 people, 30 people doing that on a daily basis, a regular basis, than to have 2 or 3 people go out to strangers' homes and try. And again, nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying, if we want to be as effective as we can, I think we're missing a key part. All right. Well, I said I was going to be short. I'm sorry. I'm going on here. We'll wrap up here. I ad-libbed too much. I'm kind of like, well, kind of like a politician we all know that kind of ad-libs along and gives hour-and-a-half speeches. But that's another thing. All right. So the point is, what are we doing to reach others for Christ? Not what is the church doing. We're part of the church, but the question is, what are we doing? I'll close with this little story. I've used it before, but I like it, and it's applicable. But the story told of a small dog who had been struck by a car and was lying by the side of the road. A man driving by noticed the dog was still alive. He stopped his car. He picked up the dog and took him home to care for him. And there at home, he discovered the dog had been stunned, had some minor cuts and things, but otherwise seemed all right. And so he kind of bandaged up the worst of the scrapes and so forth, cleaned off the wounds and so forth. Well, he was carrying the dog from the house to the barn where the dog he thought could rest overnight, sleep overnight. And before he got to the barn, the dog suddenly jumped down, scampered off, and took off. And the fellow just thought to himself, he said, what an ungrateful dog. Well, he thought no more about the incident until the next evening when he heard a scratching at the door. And when he opened it, there was that little dog he had treated with another hurt dog. I don't know if the story is true, but the point is, one way that we show our appreciation and our thankfulness for what God has done for us is to bring others to the one that can bandage their wounds and help them. That's the greatest way that we can give thanks to what God has done for us. All right. Well, I do want to give a prayer emphasis tonight. And I have a notebook here. I don't know. That woke Diesel up. All right, what I'd like, don't pay attention to the heading on it. That's just, it was a free paper. But take a couple sheets each, or just one probably would do. But what I'd like to do is, since we're talking about being intentional, is to take that and write down the name or names of, I'm just going to say, at least 3 people if you can. 3 people that you know need Christ. Okay? So I'll give you a moment. You can write those down now. If you can't think of 3, you can finish it at home. But 3 people that you know need Christ, or if they don't need Christ, maybe they just need compassion. Okay? But we're talking about lost souls tonight, so if we can, let's focus on that. 3 people need Christ, and then here's what I want you to do. I want you to pray for them. Okay? Pray for them every day, first of all. Second of all, I want you to ask yourself or ask God, how can I reach out to them? How can I be used to help them come to Christ? And if you don't know them that well, that's probably the first step, is to get to know them a little bit better. Maybe to take them, what was I going to say, banana bread, or I don't know, but develop a relationship with them. It might have to start there. But whatever it is, but number 1, pray for them. Number 2, ask yourself, what can I do to reach them? And so if you will do that, that is my challenge for tonight. And those watching at home, same thing. If you would do that, I would very much appreciate it. And I mentioned 2 sheets. I was going to, if you want to write a first name down, and we'd post them somewhere as a prayer board, but I don't know if, I think just keep it personal. Why don't we do that? So, but just write down at least 3 people. You can add more if you want. But 3 people. We've got a couple weeks in October left, about 2.5 weeks or so of October left. We have November, December, almost 3 months. And so let's pray for whoever these 3 individuals are that God has brought to your mind, and see what we can do to help reach them. And then see what God might do before this year is over. All right? That's just a starting place, okay? Understand. But again, we need to be aware. I guess that's the main emphasis tonight. Be aware of those around us and what we might be able to do to show compassion on them. And I go, you all are already compassionate. I understand that, but if you're like me, again, sometimes all we can see is our agenda for the day, and so let's just let the Lord open our eyes a little bit and be more intentional with looking for those that might need some compassion and that might need Christ. All right? And I think if we do that, God will bless us. So, all right. Well, let's. Well, in fact, what we'll do just for about 3 minutes is, or 2 minutes, is pray for those. I'll pray for those quietly, those individuals on your list, and then I'll just close with a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Why don't we do that? So just give you a minute or two to pray for those 3 individuals specifically. You know their situation, you know their needs, but give you a few moments to pray for them, and then I will close in prayer. So we can cut the light.